are back one more time with more looking at our HasLab Omega Prime set. And today we are going to be looking at Bluebolts and our included accessories. So, without further ado, let's just go ahead and start with our accessories, because this is going to be probably the least exciting for a lot of people and should go by pretty quickly. Now, we did already take a look at our included headmaster, our little Cerebros Port Max head. So here is our display stands. Again, this was an unlockable tier, you know. Not a lot of people really cared about this. I thought it was cool, but it wasn't anything priority for me. But it is meant to be the ground bridge or space bridge from the show. So we have our little armature with the little pegs for plugging into the buttsier guys. This is pretty standard. We've seen this kind of thing before. And it does, as you can see back here, the way I have that in there, it does just sort of slide right in, just like that. It is reversible, so you can pull this out and slide it in the other way, just like that, depending on, you know, who you are trying to display. Each of these also has an adapter piece. Got a little peg hole and peg right there, and it just plugs in to the back right here like that, and boom, boom. Honestly, you can see how Magnus is standing right there. These guys, they don't really need these. They don't lift them up enough to even, you know, have them as like flight stands when it comes down to it. Also, the only way I've really found this to work for Magnus specifically is if you have the adapter in and you're plugging it in right underneath his crotch here, because he's got two peg holes on that little flap down there, which doesn't look really good, if I'm being honest. So it's a bit weird. Each of these also get the whole thing gets two of these right here, and these just plug in right back here. They snap into place quite nicely. And then, let's pull this back out of here. You can then link these together, just like that. And then, of course, there are two of these, and they attach onto the other side right here to give you the little ramps on the ends. And there's your full ground bridge, which does give a cool display for, you know, for them in vehicle mode, although you can really only put one of them on here. Though I imagine if they do release any of the other robots in disguise characters, this will give them a nice little option for displays. You also have 4 ports right here on both sides of the bridge, little 5mm ports. So, you know, you can customize that up a little bit. But that's really all there is to that. Nothing really to write home about. It's neat, but, you know, I don't think a lot of people really care too much about that. And then, of course, we have our brave Maximus sword. So, yes, we finally have an official release of the Sword of Fortress Maximus, or I guess in this case, Grand Maximus, in America. This is not a remake of the original. Well, I mean, it is a remake of the original. It's not the original. It is an entirely new mold, new construction. Very nice purple, black and silver going up here. There's Cybertronian. I believe that's till all are one. They've kind of scrunched it, so it's a little hard to read, but it's on both sides, on both front and back. Going up the handle here, you got little 5mm peg holes all the way up the handle. And the drill tip. All right, Magnus, let go of this for a minute. So when you get this, it does come in a couple of pieces. So your handle, if I can get it to come back apart at all, because it's tight. There we go. Okay. So you'll have your handle here in one piece. Well, I say one piece. This will be like this, but this is actually multiple little segments here. And they do have, if you can see that, they do have a metal bar going through there to make it a little bit more solid. I appreciate that. That's a really neat little touch. So each of these, where it's the round and then the little more squared with the hole, is its own segment, and then the drill tip is also its own piece, which I thought is kind of neat. Also, this comes apart. It just sort of, splits apart into pieces. It's not how it comes, it's just that's something it can do. Now, sadly, there is no handle attachment for the tip, so you really can't do the smaller sword for your Cerebros if you wanted to do that. But I mean, hey, it's a thing. And now it's in pieces. I have destroyed the sword. I have destroyed the sword of Maximus. But hey, it's not a big deal. And going right over here, we're going to take a look. This is what it looks like in the hands of the Chug Fortress Maximus. Kind of a, he's just kind of holding it there all like nonchalant. All right, and now on to the main event of this group. We are looking at our Bluebolts, and I just knocked his missile off. How about that? How about that? And I just yanked his arm off. Okay, hold on. Let's. I can't make this up. I can't. Okay, let me repurpose this camera here just a hair. Just a hair. Hit. There. All right. So let's take a good look at Bluebolts. He does come packaged in robot mode. Nice colors of blue, gray here. I really dig this head sculpt. It kind of has that. Yeah. Let's just do this. Stay. He kind of has that whole, beak with a set of eyes above there, kind of like Desaurus's does. He's got the more Magnus shoulder pads than Ultra Magnus does because he's got the big high shoulders. There we go. Going down here. Here he is in the back. Hollow back of the legs, which is kind of to be expected how he transforms. Hollow inside of the thighs, which have nothing to do with the transformation. I hate that. He's got a cap on the back of his head. Yeah. So I really do dig this guy because he fits. And what do I mean by the way he fits? Well, his robot design kind of has that whole Brave series look to it, which a lot of the characters in Robots in Disguise kind of did. You know how Brave was a sort of a spiritual successor to Transformers. Transformers 2000 was a spiritual successor to both Transformers and the Brave series. He's also rocking the hands are overrated mentality, which was pretty prevalent for a lot of Transformers in the late 90s and early 2000s. He's got little curled feet right there. Curled feet. And for articulation, the head is on a ball joint. A little bit of wiggle there. A little bit of turn there. You see past my thumb. The shoulders do a full 360. They go in and out and bop himself in the head with them. You do have an elbow bend, a little over 90 degrees, as well as a rotation right there. You can also turn the gun, and you can turn the little red pieces right there if that's anything for you. You do have a waist swivel right here, first one in the group to have one. You can also bend them backwards. You can totally get punched in the face. Anyway, you do have swivels here for the hips or universal joints. Now on mine, one of these does have a little bit of flashing, I guess. Sometimes when you have a mushroom peg that you can swivel and it just sort of falls off on its own. It's not too bad on mine. I'm pretty sure that's your mileage may vary. We can go in and out. You can actually go, you can get past his legs. You can go farther than the full splits. Thigh swivel, and because of transformation, super deep knee bends right there. We do have a very small ankle tilt, but he's got it. It's there. it's a thing. And yeah, he does have his little missiles. These are a separate pack-in, and they do just tab on back here. And not all of these tabs are created equal. They look like they are, but some of them are more loose than others. So just kind of find the one that's the best fit for you. And as you can see, the missile tips do also have that tiny peg there for the blast effects, if you want to put blast effects on there. And he does have pegs and holes, just like the rest of these guys do. This is where you can kind of see. I mentioned in Ultra Magnus that his blue plastic wasn't just blue plastic. It was painted blue over blue plastic. And if you can see here, you can see this is the regular blue color of the plastic, and then this is the blue paint over it. All right. So what they did here this time around is they made this guy into a weaponizer. I know a lot of people really like the weaponizers. I'm myself included. I really love the gimmick of them coming apart and being used as weapons and everything. And I thought it fit best with the first two series of weaponizers because, they were the missing robots from our big city bots, like, Cog and whatnot, which in the original toys were, built from all the different weapons that plugged onto the figures. And because of that, he completely comes apart. So he comes apart at both shoulders, both elbows. These also come off. You can get a better look too at that difference in the regular plastic plus versus the painted. He does come apart at the waist, and he comes apart at the thighs. Now, I'm not going to go through a bunch of possible combinations you can do with him once you take him all apart. I mean, he's a weaponizer. The weaponizers were all the same. You take them apart, make little weapons or things that were supposed to look like armor, plug them onto anybody who's got 5mm ports all over them. So you can already imagine there's a lot of things you can possibly do with this. He does have some specific things he can do for integration with Ultra Magnus, and we will show those. But we're not going to go through like all the weird, crazy possible combinations. But for comparison, we will at least show him off here with Cog. You can see how he scales with a older weaponizer. Kind of a similar build here. And because we've been using him so far, here he is with Brawn. And of course, you can see how he scales there with Magnus. And just to show it off, here he is with his vintage counterpart. This is kind of a cheap shot because that doesn't transform into a robot. And as you can see, just like the rest of my vintage Magnus, he's very, very discolored. Oh, it's sad. It's so sad. But moving right along, let's talk about his transformation and how he integrates into Magnus. But before we do that, in Magnus's video, I kind of completely forgot about another little hidden feature that's on him. I mean, it's not hidden. They advertised it when they put this thing up. But here inside his chest, untab this, Magnus now has a matrix, which, that fits into how things worked out in the show. Just like Optimus Prime's, it is removable. I will say it's a little tighter, but a little bit easier to get a grip on. And it's nearly identical to Optimus, or it may, in fact, be identical to Optimus's. Clear plastic with semi-transparent metallic green paint. And he also has a little silver paint on the inside of his chest there. And we'll just put that back in. There we go. And we'll move him back here to the back. And we will go through Bluebolts' transformation. Now, much like those first weaponizers, he is a bit of a parts former. If that's something that bothers you, then, hey, it is what it is. But we'll go ahead and pull his missiles off first thing. And then we'll go ahead and pull his arms off. And that's all the parts forming we actually need to do here. So he's got a flat back here. clear piece of flap right there. You can rotate that around and close that back up. I'm going to rotate him here at the waist. Turn his, this way. And move these up just like that. Tab these in on both sides. Tab these in. Then push the feet in and make sure they snap in right there. And then you can actually leave that up. There we have that. And then as far as the arms and legs are concerned, you just want to orientate these where these little tabs are facing up with the post facing up. Turn that. And then these, there's a little hole right here on the inside of where his feet. These will plug in right there, and this little tab will tab into a little slot right back there. Do that on both sides. And then you take his missiles, and you've got the little ports here that would have been the bottom of his feet. You can just plug those in, just like that. And there you have Bluebolts in his weapon mode. And again, pull that vintage one back out again. For comparison, you can see he is a bit smaller than the original one. Of course, the original one did have, the actual spring-loaded gimmick in there. And there we go. Now, this did have a secondary weapon mode, which was the single rifle, which is just basically doing that. And he really doesn't do that because there's no position for the pegs. He does have this one peg hole here, but it doesn't line up in a way where this goes in the center and Ultra Magnus can still hold it where it plugs in back here. But you can, in fact, pull both of these off, and they peg in together like this. And you can kind of make that into one big rifle that way. So our standard way for him to wield Bluebolts, you'll actually want to untab that little tab right there and turn this around. And just like on the original toy, and we mentioned this in Magnus's video, he does still have the gaps in his armpits with the little plugs in there. Now this time they're just 5mm plugs. They're not, keyed like the original was. But you can reach in here and plug that straight in there. And then put his hands around the handles. Now this time too, they've got a little 5mm hole right here in the handle. So you can actually line that up with his thumb and kind of sort of get it in there. It's a bit tricky, but you can kind of sort of get it in there and have him holding Bluebolts. But that's how that looks. And what's neat is this time you can really just see that face right through that viewfinder. And that looks pretty good. Yeah. And here both of them are together, both wielding Bluebolts. And you see how I was saying this time he's actually looking through the viewfinder. Here on the original, he can't see. He can't see shit. And of course on the vintage one, his arms are actually plugged in here onto the side, and that's how that's holding straight. And of course, the whole gimmick of him plugging in here was to deal with the sounds, to make that sound that's supposed to sound like a gun, I guess. It is what it is. It's a classic. What you're gonna do. Now, he does have another little integration here as far as being a weaponizer. Let's go ahead and get him back out for here. We're going to go ahead and give him this as just a full-on bazooka here. There we go. So we have him doing that as a bazooka. But we're going to take our Bluebolts here, and we are going to partially retransform him somewhat. And maybe this is why this is like this. Could be. Could be. Just like that. So here on Magnus's back, we have these little grooves right here. And Bluebolt's arms, or his arm sockets, will actually very snugly slide right into those grooves, just like that. And now your Ultra Magnus has a missile launcher backpack and a double-sided bazooka that one side's a chain gun. Here in robot mode, he has another very, very clever way of integrating, and that is the way of storage. Yeah, that's right. You can store Bluebolts inside of Ultra Magnus in robot mode, and he also doubles as gap fillers when you do. So we'll go ahead and pull him off of here. Just have him right there. So we're going to go ahead and pull off the legs, but we do want to leave them turned, the hips turned up like this. Straighten that out, just like that. And we're going to fold this down. It doesn't really matter which way you fold it. All right. And this peg hole right here, we open up Ultra Magnus's chest, lift up his head, and you see that peg right there. That's going to peg into Bluebolts' back. If I can line it up at the weird angle that I'm sitting here at, just like that. And then just close that back up. Go. And then just plug this back together, just like we had it before. Provided I can. There we go. And boom. Now Bluebolts is in there, and he's filling out some of the gaps that are up there on his shoulders. But we're not done, because now Ultra Magnus's biggest gaps of all are those gigantic monster shins of his. So this time around, we're going to pull these missiles out, just like that. And then on the legs, you want them to be at an L shape, just like this. And if you see, we've got a little bit of a cutout right here. So your knee, well, his feet, but this little gray piece basically is going to be sitting right here, and his thigh is going to peg in to the side right there. And do that for both sides. And then if you don't want him wielding the arms as guns, you can take these, rotate that around, and these will plug in right there, just like that. Boom. And then the last thing you're supposed to do is to take the missile and stick it right there. I'm not the biggest fan of that, because that's hanging off quite a ways, and you know, one backwards tumble, that's going to be pretty bad. So me personally, I like to put the missile, you got a little bit of leeway here, you can put the missile right there. Boom. And with that, now the backs of his legs are not quite so hollow. You get some bulk going on there. Staring at his butt. Don't you be staring at his butt. That ain't right. That does not really hinder the articulation. You can't quite get the full knee bend because that's in the way, but you still get a little over 90 degree. You still get the full ankle tilt even with those pieces sticking right there. And again, even if you were to only do the gun, or, you know, sorry, not the gun, but just the leg, you would still have a nice gap filler that's filling things in, as you know the name gap filler implies. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. Shut up. But there is that. Now let's get him into his vehicle mode and we'll show you how Bluebolts stacks there. All right, and then for vehicle mode, we're just going to use these two peg holes with these two pegs right here and plug him on just like that. Boom. Now, if you have the vintage toy, you might remember that on the vintage toy, he's meant to plug into the back here. Now, you can plug him in here, but because these pegs aren't quite aligned the same way, he kind of twists when you plug him up here. But you can do it. But that's where he's meant to plug on the vintage one, which also gives room for a car to still pull up in here, or if you have the smaller cars, to have them up there. Here, you're not getting that. And this one, he cannot plug in back here because instead of pegs, he's got the holes. And I've tried to rotate these around to use like the shoulder pegs to plug in there and see if that'll work. But because of all the added hinges and everything he's got in here for his articulation, it just becomes sort of a floppy mess. So it's not really worth it. But yeah, there he is in all his glory. Also, as I was transforming my Ultra Magnus, I discovered that he's got tire rot. That's going to be a problem if I do manage to try to salvage this guy. Anyway, that's going to be it for this one, guys. A little bit fast and dirty, I guess. And for next time, we will do the final combination, our full-on Omega Prime. Until then, y'all have a good one.